Mr. Dixon. Today I'm going to make corned beef. But first, before you even open the corned beef, you gotta wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. Which is singing happy birthday twice. Happy birthday to you. Then you've got to dry your hands really well, and then you got to open the package. Remove from packaging and rub contents on spice packet onto the meat. Place spice rubbed corned beef into a large pot. Pour in water to cover beef. Bring water to a boil, reduce heat, cover and simmer, but we're not using that. We're using a crock pot. Check the meat occasionally while cooking. We use a meat thermometer to check our meat. So that's what we're going to use. Add water if necessary. Cook until fork tender and beef approximately 3 hours. Carve across the grain and serve. Let's get started. Not really big on cabbage in this house, so instead we're going to roast potatoes in the oven. First, you make sure that the crock pot or normal pot is clean. The crock pot is clean, so we're ready to go. But my parents have taught me how to use knives safely, luckily. Now, to open the package. Let's make sure we're safe with this knife when we're getting into this package. At this point, I could probably rip open the rest of the package and pull the meat out. This is a spice packet for putting on the top of the meat. Now you cut open the package and you pour on the spice and you rub it around. You have to make sure at least every spot gets a little bit. That way, there's a little bit of flavor for everybody with the spice. This is what you call a dry rub. Okay, then you flip over the meat and you do the other side. Even the bottom gets some. Okay, now it's time to put it into the crock pot, but you have to make sure it's fat side up so that it drips over this side. Okay, now you wash your hands again. We add just enough water to cover the meat and make sure that it doesn't get too low. The directions told us to put it to a boil, but first you need to close it. Then, since we're using a crock pot, we need to put it on saute, then simmer, and then slow cook. Those are the best ways. But obviously, first you need to turn it on. The crock pot with the corned beef is going to take about 3 hours. So we'll be ready when it's fork tender, or the meat thermometer says it's at about 160 degrees. Now we're going to work on the potatoes, which we're going to roast in the oven. Now we'll get the potatoes. Thank you, Bugs Bunny. Time to wash these dirty spuds. We're ready to cut the potatoes, so we need proper pans, and we like to use glass. Now, we're going to coat our pans with oil. We're a fan of algae oil because it has a high level of good fats and a high burning point. Thank you, Bugs Bunny. into all this good oil. You're going to set the pans aside, and then you're going to cut the potatoes. You want them in big chunks because you're roasting them. And there's also a safe way to cut them, which is like this. You curl your fingers in and you just cut. You want them in chunks about this big. And you do that with all the potatoes until you're finished. Since these are organic potatoes, you don't have to peel them. A minute ago in the song, it sounded kind of like the Twilight Zone. Now we're ready to put all these pieces of potatoes into the pan. We forgot to preheat our oven, so we're going to do that now. 385 would be about the perfect number to do for potatoes. Now we're going to put the potatoes in the pan and make sure they get nice and mixed up with the oil. Then you add salt, pepper, and oregano, and that's it. Now we're going to add all the spices. You only need a little bit and one coating for each. Same thing with the pepper and the oregano. Now it's time for the oregano. You only do little pinches at a time and sprinkle them over things like this. Now that we've added all of our spices, we mix it again before it goes in the oven. It could be really difficult, especially if there isn't enough room, so sometimes you gotta get in with your hands, even if it's messy. Now it's time to put them in the oven, but we don't really have a cooking time, so you just have to check on them about every 15 minutes. Thank you, Bugs Bunny. Always be careful about around the oven, especially if you're small and closer to it, like me. But luckily, I have some experience with putting stuff in ovens.
Excuse me, do you have any Grey Poupon? Sorry, I only have a gallon.
It's been about 40 minutes and I think the potatoes are ready. But you've got to be really careful taking them out. If you were doing yourself, it could leave a scar. I'm going to stir them up one more time. Now, we're going to check what temperature the meat is, and then we're going to seal it up in foil for 10 to 15 minutes so it helps keep the juices in the meat. Let's get out the thermometer. Now that we've got the meat out, we're gonna check its temperature. First, you get this devil-looking thermometer for meat. You stick it in, and you press this button. It says I can't really read it. It says pork, so we're good to go. Now we wrap it up in the foil really tight. Now that it's in foil, it's helping it keep the juices inside the meat. Okay, now we're ready to cut. You flip it over, and these are the grains. You have to cut across the grains. You can't cut it like that. You have to cut it like this because it's across the grain. Now we're ready to cut since we've taken it out of the foil. You have to cut it in really thin slices.